Today we're going to go over Chapter 5, and this chapter is going to be particularly important as you get ready for Assignment 3. So the overall objectives for developing a unit plan are to, first of all, recognize the national health education standards, and then to develop an appropriate lesson plan. What I find a lot in health educators today is that they think that their PowerPoint presentation is their lesson plan, but that is really not. That's a teaching tool, and it contributes to your overall lesson, but that's not the lesson plan or the curriculum within itself. So also this chapter will go over how to develop your lesson and presentation plan, as well as construct a unit of instruction, and then to think about some discussion questions. I have to say that for me, in teaching this online class, that's one of the most challenging things for me, is because I love having discussions in class, and I love having discussion questions. Certainly the discussion forum helps for that a little bit, but it's not the same as sometimes that in-person conversation. And then certainly we're going to also look at strengths and weaknesses of different types of organization. So the overview is to develop the fundamental principles, planning, and then doing a lesson presentation plan overview, as well as your lesson presentation plan. So careful planning will always serve you well, because if you plan appropriately, then it just helps you to be more confident as a health educator, and it helps you to be aware of things that may come up unexpectedly. So it creates the structure for you. It gives you your content, certainly, so you're not trying to do things on the fly. Gives you your overview, and creates those links between the different components, so it's not just a bunch of disjointed activities. It should roll up into the overall goal that you've been establishing in your needs assessment, and that you did in Assignment 2. And then also gives you those strategies then to achieve the objectives, and then to ultimately fulfill your goal. So your intervention should be based on theory. Remember that occurred earlier in the semester, where you learned about all the different kinds of theories that you might want to consider. I encourage you to really think about all the different kinds of theories that are out there. A lot of times health educators will rely almost exclusively on the health belief model, but depending on what it is that you're doing, there's other types of theories that could be very valuable, such as stages of change is very valuable for smoking cessation. So think about your theoretical framework, and then certainly use something that is evidence-based. There's lots of great curricula that are already out there that are evidence-based and have been established, and I certainly encourage you to look at that, as well as Healthy People 2020 goals, and also the National Health Education standards. And then your unit plan is really creating your order and your structure. It's where you collect your activities and organize them. So this is also your curriculum, and again, this is really a lot of what you're going to be doing in Assignment 3. And basically it may go by different names, such as the curriculum or the unit plan, but it all basically sets the structure so you can be organized in delivering your health education strategy. So there, like I started to say, there's lots of different sources that are already out there, so you're highly encouraged to not reinvent the wheel. If you go on to you can sometimes just a good Google search will lead you to already developed curricula, but you can also go onto the Centers for Disease Control websites. If you're focusing on drugs and alcohol, you might want to look at it's the SAMHSA website, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health website. So, and by evidence-based, that means that they've already been established through some kind of rigorous evaluation. So therefore, your evaluation could really be more seeing what the local intervention looked like, and not having to start from scratch with the science. So your unit construction needs to have an overview, a statement of purpose, your long-range goals and objectives and concepts. This was really your assignment 2. Behavioral objectives, and you covered that also in assignment 2. Giving yourself an outline of all of your subtopics, and then really thinking about your methods and strategies. Remember that was in chapter 4, and there were 2 sections to chapter 4, so that's a pretty big chapter with lots of information. So make sure that you have your list of the materials that you need to bring and your evaluation activities. And then in this chapter also, you guys will be developing a block plan, or learning about developing a block plan. So think about who your audience is. Think about their gender, their age group, race, ethnicity, cultural backgrounds, prior knowledge of the topic. That's really important. Don't assume that if you're going into a presentation and it's a topic that's really out in the media today, it may be that people already have a pretty high knowledge level of what the issue is. For example, if you were to provide a presentation on tobacco, people for the most part know that smoking is dangerous. So you don't you can go over some of that, but you don't need to spend a lot of time going there. Back when I was doing HIV work, I remember developing a curriculum, and beforehand I had found out that people who start an HIV educational class come into it with knowledge competency level of 90%. So I knew then that I didn't need to spend a lot of my time going over knowledge. It was really about attitudes and skill development that I needed to spend my time on. So think about what's relevant. Definitely look at language and literacy issues. We get into health literacy later on in the semester, but that's always something important. And then also know in advance how many people are going to be there, so that way you have an adequate number of materials. Get this stuff down, so know where you're going, know all the parking information. Really understand that beforehand, because when you're getting ready to present, I don't know about you, but sometimes right before I get ready to present, I get a little bit nervous. It's important sometimes to actually be nervous because it shows you care, so that's not the end of the world. But think if you're rolling in at the last minute and maybe you don't know where to park, that's going to just make you more nervous. One time I remember I was giving a presentation at UC Irvine, and this was before I worked there. I had no clue about the parking, and so I was running around that parking lot for a really long time before I actually was able to find a place to park. And where I ultimately parked, I will confess to the fact that I parked illegally, because I was just panicked at that point, and I just threw my car in somewhere because I needed to get my presentation done. So that was not good planning on my part. Definitely have the person's contact number in case you run into any problems, and know how many sessions, the timing of all of that, and then know what equipment they have and what equipment you may need to bring. So the statement of purpose is where you're going to begin, and it describes really the content that's going to be part of the curriculum. Make sure that you use statistics that can be referenced, and whenever possible, use local statistics. So I put a resource on Titanium very early on in this semester for OCHealthierTogether.org, and that has a lot of local health data and local statistics. People really want to know what's going on in their school district and their neighborhood. They're less concerned with what's going on nationally. And Orange County is kind of, we don't always look like the rest of the nation when it comes to our data. So we here in Orange County, we are we rank very well on the Robert Wood Johnson health rankings, the county health rankings, and have been consistently in the top 10 of California counties since the health rankings have begun. However, when you look at certain neighborhoods and certain cities within Orange County, we see great disparities. So making sure that you localize your statistics whenever possible. So like if you're going to do a presentation for students at Cal State Fullerton, you may want to have some statistics from Cal State Fullerton, or you may want to have some statistics about student athletes or the Greek system. The more you can customize it, the more believable you'll be. Then your long-range goals are really your very broad kind of outcomes. It's okay to be global with these and to be rather bodacious with them. Because they're going to really reflect what is optimum. And so having 3 or 4 general goals is usually plenty. And then, but your programmatic objectives, which is what you developed for assignment 2, is really where you're going to then plug in your different interventions. So what your program objectives do is they help to focus really what your activities are going to be and focus your intervention. And that's going to be based on guidelines, for example, Healthy People 2020. So here are a couple of sample objectives. Again, you all did this in assignment 2, and people did very well with that. So I won't belabor that, but there's some great examples of objectives in your book as well. So behavioral objectives are also sometimes referred to as performance indicators. This is really probably like one of the most important things, because it's what is going to occur as a result of your intervention. So it's not, again, just like for people to know more stuff, but for people to actually take some action. So they need to be stated in behavioral terms. It needs to be measurable. And you need to state like specific cognitive, affective, or psychomotor skills that will be acquired and implemented as a result of your intervention. So here's a few examples, and these are also in your book and also in the additional slides of some behavioral objectives. And then in terms of outlining your content, think about all the items that you want to use. You can also put in an appendix. So if you have handouts or something like that, you may want to put that into an appendix. Really, think about your curriculum or your unit plan as something that's going to stand the test of time. So if, say, something happens and you're not able to provide the presentation, then somebody else should be able to pick that up and know exactly what to do. So that's why putting sometimes supplemental information such as your handouts or your PowerPoints in the appendix can be super handy, and it should be in the order in which you're going to be delivering the intervention. So here's a sample outline that could be abbreviated. So you see your main headers and then kind of what all the subtopics are that you'll be presenting in this particular intervention. And then your methods or your strategies, again, this is chapter 4. So that's really where a lot of your attention needs to be. And you want to select the appropriate methods based on what your outcomes are and what your objectives are. So when you're preparing assignment 3, one of the things I don't want to see is only using PowerPoints or only using videos or something like that. Because again, if all you're looking at is knowledge competency, then those interventions, or those methods rather, are appropriate, but most theoretical models don't just rely on information dissemination. So think about which objectives the method will support, and make sure that you're using proper citations as you're developing your curriculum. Make sure that you provide yourself with a list of materials. This should be in your curriculum, just again, so that way if somebody's picking this up, they know, do I need an LCD projector? Do I need to bring pamphlets? Do I need to bring markers and Post-it notes? What do they need to bring with them? And just be more comprehensive. It's better to be more broad than limited. When you go out and implement your curricula, you should always provide, make a little bit of extras, whatever you're bringing, just in case of something. Also make a master copy. If you're going to use PowerPoint in particular, you could end up there to do your presentation, and maybe your projector doesn't work, or I've been out to do a presentation before, and all of a sudden my bulb burns out and I don't have a spare with me. So you want to always have a master and have a copy for yourself. And then make sure that you evaluate the achievement of each of your objectives. So, and your objectives in assignment 2 were written in a way that they could be evaluated. So you want to know if you've met them, and if not, then that's impetus to revise your curricula. So you want to measure knowledge, but also attitude, skills, and behavior change. You can use a variety of different assessment techniques and strategies, and then you also want to include a way to get feedback for yourself or for the curricula. So you notice, like, even for me, I had posted after exam 1 just a quick little online survey so you guys could give me feedback as to how this course is going for you. So process evaluation really looks at the effectiveness of the intervention, the job you're doing, as well as how the intervention was implemented. Outcome requires some pre and post tests, so you can't show knowledge gain unless you do a pre-test, because you don't know where they started, so you need your baseline. And then if you if you're looking at like some outcomes in terms of behavior change over time, then you might want to go out as far as 6 months post-intervention. We do that at where I work with our smoking cessation services. We follow up with people at 180 days because that's the most stringent standard that we could have. A lot of people follow up at 30 days. Most people, if they're going to drop off and no longer stay quit and take up smoking again, if they're going to relapse, they'll do it sometime within that first 6 months. So that's why we use the more rigorous standard of the 6 months. Have a list in your curriculum of all of your resources and materials. Make sure that you're using something that's science-based. Really do think about the literacy level of your audience, and list also any other information that another health educator might need, such as the cost of materials or the website where you got your pamphlets. Anything that somebody else can then pick that up and use will be very valuable for them. So here's an example of a block plan, and it really the function of this is to show how much time you want to spend on each activity. So if you don't plan this in advance, then you're not going to know if you're on track, and you need to hold yourself accountable. So it might be like, for example, with a discussion. Discussion sometimes can go very long if you have a class that's very engaged and have experiences that they want to share, but also discussions can go really short if people don't have anything to say. So you need to know how to adjust your time based on how the audience reaction is, and make sure that you have different kinds of interventions so you can engage all different kinds of learners. Remember that you're going to have some people that are going to be more audio, some people who will be more visual, and then you'll have some people who really need some kind of experience to help them to learn. So this is not your lesson plan. It's really looking at kind of your layout for your intervention. And so then you also want to have a presentation plan, and that's really the outline for how your larger instructional units are going to go. So you want to think about the setting, how many sessions you have, and how long each session is going to last. Again, who's in your audience, and then think about the national or state standards that you might be trying to address. And with objectives, make sure that you keep them smart, right? So we want them to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed or time-bound. People will use different terms for the T, but you want all of those elements in there. So, and that was definitely something that you guys worked on in one of your discussion forum assignments as well, right? Because some of those came out initially not so smart, and over time you guys were able to develop some lovely smart objectives. So when you're giving your presentation, you wanna really hook them in the beginning. So you may want to do some kind of an icebreaker, or give some kind of story or a statistic, but something that's going to draw your audience in. So, and then good public speaking is that you tell them what you're going to tell them. You then let them know why you're going to be telling them, why it matters, and how they're going to benefit. So, the developmental section is really the core of your lesson plan, and this is really your recipe. Again, it should be, set ready, so any health educator can pick it up and be able to implement it without even being able to talk to you in advance. And so when you're doing this too, make sure that all the information is there, and that your discussion questions, give some variety to them, so that way, depending on people's comfort, depending on people's levels of sophistication, you have something for everyone. So there's 6 levels of progressively developing more complex questions, and that's referred to in your book as Bloom's taxonomy. The low level would be just simple recall. Intermediate, they're asked to draw some conclusions, maybe rate something, and then high is to be able to apply the information. Application is that's your money shot. That's really where you want people to be able to do something as a result of your intervention. So even being able to know, like, for example, how they can take the information that you've given them and apply it to certain situations, like condom negotiation, or being able to plan healthy eating in the workplace with limited time and resources. So kind of helping them to think through different situations. So, and then you have your conclusion, which is your summary of your key points. You remind them what you've already said, give instructions for the next meeting, get feedback, and also be available for questions and comments. So anticipate beforehand what problems you may encounter. Even the most seasoned health educators are going to have problems from time to time, and I can tell you that in almost 30 years of providing health education, I've definitely had my fair share of situations that I just wasn't expecting to have happen. But there's some common things that you can take care of, right? So make sure you have plenty of materials. Make sure that your methods are appropriate. Making sure that everything is matching up with your objectives. Make sure that you have good variety. Make sure that you have evaluation. Plan your time accordingly, and be prepared for technological glitches. This is big, right? Because as we become more and more dependent on technology, maybe you go into do your health education intervention, and you have you want to punch up something from YouTube and you don't have internet access, or you sent your slides in advance and your slides didn't come. So there's lots of different things that could come up, so make sure that you plan for everything. So if something goes wrong, and sometime in the course of your career it will, first just breathe. It happens to the best of us. Know that your audience wants you to be successful, believe it or not. People don't want things to fall apart for you, so just don't panic. We already talked in the previous slide about having backup plans, and then implement that backup plan. That's why you have a backup plan. Stay focused on your audience and what they need, and then if nothing else, just check in with your audience and reassess as to what you may be able to do at that point. So you may need to drastically modify your lesson plan or your unit plan at that point, and just maybe only do one or two of your activities that you brought. One thing that I always do, always bring like markers and paper, because you can always do different kinds of brainstorming activities. Also, markers and papers gives you a place to write. If you no longer have access to your slides, you can put up some key points. So always come with at least that. So there's a lot of ways that you can evaluate your intervention. And so a lot of times people will use like a post test, but get feedback from your audience. If there are problems, get feedback about that. Make sure that if your objectives, make sure you use pre and post to measure knowledge gain or change in attitudes. Basically, if there's a change, you can't know if there's a change if you didn't do a pre and post. If you're only doing a post, then you're talking about knowledge competency, or you're talking about attitudes at the end of the intervention, but you can't really measure the effects of your intervention. So your chapter is suggesting that 15% of your time should be spent on evaluation, and I can tell you that it's a pretty consistent standard that when you're developing your budget, which is not part of curriculum development, but something you should know, particularly if you're interested in supervision and management, about 10% of your resources should be allocated for evaluation. It's kind of a standard for prevention. And that brings us to the conclusion of Chapter 5.